There is a pattern you have lived through. You meet someone. The connection is real. The energy between you is alive and moving and full of something that feels significant. And so you lean in, naturally, instinctively, because when something feels good, the human response is to move toward it. And then something shifts, not dramatically, not with an announcement, quietly. She becomes slightly less available. The responses come a little slower. The warmth is still there, but it is further away than it was. And you, sensing the distance, do what feels logical. You lean in further. You reach toward what is retreating. You give more, offer more, pursue more. And she pulls back further still. This is one of the most common and least understood dynamics in human attraction. And almost every man who has experienced it has drawn the wrong conclusion from it. He has concluded that he did something wrong. That he said the wrong thing, moved too fast, was too available, was not available enough. He searches the specific details for the explanation. The specific details are not the explanation. The explanation is structural. It is built into the architecture of desire itself. And once you see it clearly, you will never misread this dynamic again. My name is Niccolò Machiavelli. I served the Florentine Republic for 14 years as second chancellor. I negotiated with popes and princes, condottieri and kings. I watched men of extraordinary capability destroy themselves through a single consistent error. Not weakness, not stupidity, not lack of resources or courage or intelligence. They misread the nature of the thing they were pursuing. They looked at the surface and drew conclusions about the depth. They observed behavior and invented explanations that made themselves feel better rather than explanations that were true. I spent my life refusing to do that. And what I learned, watching human beings pursue power and connection and recognition across 14 years of the most politically volatile city in Renaissance Europe, was this. The nature of desire is not what you think it is. And until you understand what it actually is, you will keep making the same error. Leaning in when you should hold ground. Pursuing when you should return to yourself. Closing gaps that were keeping you valuable. Today we go inside the psychology of pursuit and withdrawal. Not to give you tactics, to give you understanding. Because a man who understands what is actually happening never panics. And a man who never panics almost never loses. I want to begin with something I observed in Florence that has stayed with me across all the years since. There was a merchant in the city. Prosperous, well-regarded, genuinely good-natured. He fell into pursuit of a woman whose regard he valued enormously. And he pursued her the way a man of good character pursues what he wants. Openly, generously, without calculation. He wrote to her constantly. He arranged to be present wherever she might be. He made his feelings known with a clarity and consistency that left nothing ambiguous. He gave her, in other words, everything. All of his attention. All of his availability. All of his wanting displayed without reservation. And she withdrew. Not cruelly, not with contempt, simply away. The distance between them, which had once been charged with something alive, became quiet, settled, resolved. He could not understand it. He was, by any conventional measure, doing everything right. He was present. He was devoted. He was consistent. What he did not understand was that he had made a fundamental error about the nature of desire. He had confused the conditions that produce wanting with the conditions that produce satisfaction. He was optimizing for the wrong thing. Wanting is not produced by supply. It is produced by scarcity, by uncertainty, by the gap between what is present and what is not yet possessed. He had eliminated the gap. He had made himself entirely available, entirely known, entirely given. And in doing so, he had removed himself from the desire equation completely. The withdrawal was not a judgment on his character. It was the automatic response of a wanting system that had encountered certainty and found it uninteresting. I watched this pattern repeat across my career with a consistency that eventually stopped surprising me. The pursued always withdrew when the pursuer eliminated all distance. Not because closeness itself is unattractive, but because closeness achieved without effort, without uncertainty, without the slight resistance that makes arrival feel like something earned, produces a different neurological response than closeness that is still being pursued. The wanting system, as I came to understand it through observation rather than the science that would come centuries later, requires a gap to remain alive. Close the gap entirely and you close the wanting with it. Now I want to go deeper into the psychology of this. Because the merchant's error, while clear in retrospect, is almost universal. And it is universal because it feels like the right thing to do. When we value something, the instinct is to move toward it. To demonstrate the value we place on it through the effort we invest in it. To give generously because generosity feels like the correct expression of genuine feeling. This instinct is not wrong in every domain. In friendship, in family, in professional collaboration, consistent generosity builds the deepest bonds. But desire is a different system. And it operates by different rules. The neuroscience that would eventually confirm what I observed through decades of watching people is precise on this point. The brain's wanting system is activated not by the presence of the desired thing but by the anticipation of it. By the not yet. By the space between reaching and arriving. When a man makes himself entirely available, he eliminates the anticipation. There is nothing to reach toward because everything is already present. The wanting system, finding no gap to sustain itself, quiets. And when the wanting system quiets, what remains is something quieter and less urgent. Comfort, perhaps. Familiarity. Appreciation. But not desire. Desire requires the gap. This is why the early stages of any connection feel more alive than the settled middle. Not because the people involved are more interesting at the beginning, but because the uncertainty is higher. The outcome is not yet determined. The wanting system is fully engaged because the gap is fully present. As certainty increases, the wanting system quiets. This is not failure. It is the structure of desire expressing itself exactly as it was built to. The error is in believing that what you should do is eliminate all uncertainty as quickly as possible. Sign the contract. Secure the commitment. Close the gap. This feels like safety. Feels like wisdom. It feels like converting potential into something real and permanent. But in the domain of desire, closing the gap does not secure the thing. It ends the wanting of it. And a person who no longer wants something does not hold it carefully. There is a second force operating in the psychology of pursuit and withdrawal that most men never identify. And it is, in some ways, more important than the first. It is what I observed in every prince who successfully held power for more than a single season. The prince who pursued the loyalty of his people directly, visibly, desperately, always lost it. The prince who was seen to need the approval of those beneath him had already surrendered the primary quality that made him worth following. Because what people follow is not need. What people follow is sufficiency. The man who needs nothing from you is the most compelling figure in any room. Not because he is cold. Not because he is indifferent. But because his completeness is legible. It communicates itself without effort. And completeness, in a world full of people reaching toward each other for validation and reassurance, is extraordinarily rare. When a man pursues a woman with visible urgency, he communicates something he does not intend to communicate. He communicates that her regard is necessary to him, that he is incomplete without it, that the gap between who he is and who he needs to be is filled by her response. And the moment she reads that communication, something shifts, not necessarily consciously, not as a calculated decision, as an instinctive response to a signal. The signal is need. And need, in the domain of attraction, is the opposite of the signal that produces desire. Desire is produced by strength, by the sense that what you are pursuing has value independent of whether you pursue it, that it exists fully in itself, pointed at its own direction, indifferent to whether you arrive. I observed this in Cesare Borgia, among others. Whatever his moral failures, and they were considerable, Borgia understood this principle with a precision that most men never achieve. He never pursued. He positioned. He made himself the fixed point that others moved toward. He cultivated the quality of a man who had already decided the outcome and was simply waiting for circumstances to confirm it. The result was that people desired his alliance, his approval, his regard, the way they desired scarce and valuable things. Not because he performed indifference, because he genuinely had a direction that did not depend on any particular person's response. The withdrawal that a pursuing man triggers in the person he is pursuing is, at its root, a response to this signal. The signal of need. The signal of incompleteness. The signal that his direction is toward her rather than toward his own becoming. And she pulls back not because she does not feel the connection, but because the pulling toward her, at that intensity, communicates something that desire cannot survive. Now I want to address something directly, because the psychology I am describing is frequently misread, and the misreading produces its own set of errors. The answer to pursuit is not performed indifference. It is not calculated coldness. It is not the deliberate withholding of genuine feeling in order to manufacture a psychological effect. I have seen men attempt this. They read the principle and they apply it as a technique. They stop responding. They manufacture distance. They perform the qualities of a man who has his own direction without actually having it, and they are seen through immediately, because the performance of sufficiency is not sufficiency. A man who is pretending to have a life that absorbs him, in order to seem less available, produces a texture that is detectable. Something is slightly wrong. The timing is calculated in a way that feels calculated. The distance is constructed in a way that feels constructed. And what she reads, beneath the performance, is the same need he was expressing when he was pursuing openly, just wearing a different costume. The principle is not a technique. It is a description of a state. The state of a man who genuinely has a direction, who is genuinely absorbed in becoming something, who genuinely does not require any particular outcome from any particular interaction to remain intact. That state cannot be performed convincingly. It can only be built, and it is built the same way everything worth having is built, through the accumulated work of directed effort across time, through the development of virtue, through the patient construction of a life substantial enough to absorb you fully. The man who has that life does not pursue compulsively because he is genuinely otherwise engaged. His responses are slower because he is genuinely doing something else. His availability is limited because his life genuinely limits it. His direction is forward and inward because that is where the work is. And the woman who encounters that man encounters something she almost never finds. A man who is complete. A man who is moving. A man whose wanting, when it is directed toward her, feels like a choice rather than a need. That is a completely different signal. And it produces a completely different response. Let us talk about the withdrawal itself. Because I have described what triggers it but not what it actually is. When she pulls back, most men read it as rejection, as a verdict on their worth, as information about how she feels about them specifically. This reading is almost always wrong. What withdrawal almost always is, at the moment it begins, is a test of a particular question. Not a conscious test, not a calculated one, an instinctive one. The question is this: does he have a center? When I pursue someone and they lean back, what I am discovering is whether they have a fixed point inside themselves that holds regardless of my movement. Whether they are grounded in something that does not shift when I shift. Whether there is a self there that persists independent of my regard. If the man responds to her withdrawal by pursuing harder, he has answered the question. The answer is no. His center moves when she moves. He is oriented toward her rather than toward himself. He is, in the language of the instinct that is running the test, not a fixed point. He is a variable that she controls. And a variable that she controls is not compelling. It is comfortable, perhaps. It is safe. But it does not produce desire. If the man responds to her withdrawal by returning to himself, he has answered the question differently. His center held. He did not chase the retreating signal. He did not amplify his pursuit in proportion to her distance. He went back to his work, his direction, his life, and left the gap exactly where it was. This answer produces a different response. Not always immediately. Not always visibly. But something shifts in the assessment. The question has been answered. There is a center. And a man with a center is a man worth moving toward. I watched this dynamic play out in political allegiances across my entire career in Florence. The prince who chased the loyalty of wavering allies always lost them. The prince who held his position demonstrated that his direction did not depend on their allegiance, and waited, almost always recovered them. Because the holding of position, the refusal to chase, communicated the one thing that makes a man worth following. He does not need you to be what he is. There is a third layer to this psychology that I want to address, because it is the layer that, once understood, makes everything else fall into place. It is the relationship between desire and identity. I spoke in another context about projected desire. The observation that we rarely want objects for their own qualities. We want them for the identity they represent, the version of ourselves that possessing them would create. This operates in attraction with particular intensity. When a woman desires a man, part of what she is desiring is the version of herself that is with him, the identity conferred by his choosing her, the self-concept of being someone that this particular man, with his particular qualities, found worth choosing. This means that the qualities she perceives in him directly determine the value of his attention. A man of no particular distinction, who pursues her with urgency, offers her an identity of limited value. He is saying, through his pursuit, that she is worth the attention of a man of no particular distinction. This is not a compelling offer, however sincerely it is made. A man of genuine depth, genuine capability, genuine direction, who does not pursue urgently but whose attention, when given, is clearly deliberate, offers something entirely different. He is saying, through the quality of his restraint, that his attention is a scarce resource, and that she has earned some of it. This is not manipulation. It is the accurate expression of something real. The man who has built something in himself, who has direction and depth and a life of genuine substance, is not performing value. He has it. And his restrained, deliberate attention is the natural expression of a man who knows what he has built and does not distribute it carelessly. Machiavelli, in his years of service to Florence, was not indifferent to the regard of the powerful men he advised and negotiated with. But he understood that the quality of his counsel depended on his willingness to give it honestly rather than to give them what they wanted to hear. His value was inseparable from his independence. The moment he began pursuing their approval rather than serving their genuine interests, he would become worthless to them. The same principle operates here. The moment a man begins pursuing her response rather than living his direction, he becomes something different. He becomes a man oriented toward her. And a man oriented toward you rather than toward himself is not the same offer as a man who is oriented toward something beyond you and has chosen to include you in it. One of these is need. One of these is choice. And she can feel the difference immediately, beneath any words, beneath any behavior, beneath any presentation. Now I want to give you the practical intelligence that all of this produces. Not tactics. Understanding. Because a man who understands what is happening does not need a script. He reads the situation accurately and responds from his actual position rather than from anxiety. The first thing to understand is this. When she pulls back, do not move toward her. Return to yourself. Not as a calculated move. As the accurate expression of a man who has something to return to. If you have built a life of genuine substance, returning to it when the dynamic shifts are natural. It requires no effort. It is simply where you go when you are not with her. If returning to yourself requires effort, that is the most important information the dynamic is giving you. It is telling you that you have not yet built the thing that makes all of this work. You have not yet constructed the interior life, the directed ambition, the body of work that makes a man genuinely self-sufficient. That is the real work, and it cannot be shortcut. The second thing to understand is this. The gap is not the problem. The gap is the condition. Most men experience the gap between themselves and the person they are pursuing as a problem to be solved. They want to close it, to resolve it, to arrive at certainty as quickly as possible. But the gap is where desire lives. The gap is what keeps the wanting system engaged. The gap is the alive space between where you are and where you are not yet. Your goal is not to close the gap as quickly as possible. Your goal is to manage the quality of the gap, to make the space between you interesting rather than anxious, charged rather than empty. This happens naturally when both people are genuinely in motion, when both have direction, when both are still becoming something. The gap between them is not the silence of disinterest. It is the space between two people who are each pointed at something and have chosen to include the other in their trajectory. That kind of gap never fully closes. And it never needs to, because it is not a problem. It is the shape of the connection. The third thing to understand is the most important. You cannot want yourself into being someone worth pursuing. Everything I have described in this conversation, the sufficiency, the direction, the genuine absorption in becoming, the restrained and deliberate attention that signals real value, none of it can be manufactured in the moment. None of it can be performed convincingly enough to sustain the reading for any length of time. It has to be real. And making it real requires the same thing that making anything real requires: time, or honest self-assessment. The willingness to sit with the uncomfortable truth that you are not yet the man you intend to be, and to go to work on the distance between where you are and where that man is. Machiavelli called this virtue. Not goodness, not morality, capability. The full, formidable development of your particular nature into something that commands genuine respect rather than performed deference. Virtue is built across years. It cannot be acquired in a weekend. It cannot be borrowed from a philosophy or a content channel or a set of principles read on a screen. But it can be built, steadily, deliberately, one decision at a time across enough time, until the man who looks back at you from the mirror is genuinely someone with a direction, a depth, and a life substantial enough to absorb him. That man does not chase. He does not need to. She already knows where he is. Let us return to the merchant in Florence. He never understood what happened. He searched the specific details of his pursuit for the error and never found it because the error was not in the details. It was in the orientation. He was oriented toward her. His direction was toward her response. His sufficiency was conditional on her regard. And she read all of this with an accuracy that required no conscious analysis, in the way that human beings have always read the fundamental posture of the people they encounter. What she read was a man without a fixed center, a man whose direction shifted with hers, a man who was reaching toward her not from fullness but from need. And need, however genuine, however sincere, however accompanied by all the correct external behaviors, does not produce desire. It produces something else. Sympathy, perhaps. Discomfort, sometimes. The quiet, settling sense that the gap has closed and the wanting has gone with it. The man she could not stop thinking about was not the one who gave her everything. It was never that man. It was the one she could not fully reach. Not because he was withholding. Because he was genuinely elsewhere. Genuinely absorbed. Genuinely pointed at something beyond her that she had not yet been permitted to fully see. He was a man, in other words, who had done the work. Not the work of attraction. Not the work of strategy or positioning or psychological technique. The work of becoming. The patient, unglamorous, decade-long work of building something real inside himself. Something that did not require her validation to exist. Something that produced its own gravity, its own direction, its own forward motion, independent of any particular response from any particular person. Machiavelli wrote that fortune favors the bold. He meant something precise by this. He did not mean the aggressive. He did not mean the reckless. He meant the man who has prepared so thoroughly, who has built so carefully, who has developed his virtue so completely, that when fortune presents the moment, he is ready for it. He is ready not because he has been waiting for it, because he has been building while it was absent, because his preparation did not depend on a particular outcome, because he was going to build regardless. That man, when fortune finally cooperates, meets the moment with something the unprepared man never can. Equanimity. The settled quality of a person who is not afraid of the outcome because they are not defined by it, who can move toward what they want with full conviction and release it with full grace, who can hold the gap open without anxiety because they have something to return to when it shifts. That quality, more than any technique, more than any principle, more than any understanding of the psychology of pursuit and withdrawal, is what changes the dynamic. Because it is not a strategy. It is a state of being. And it is readable. Immediately. Beneath any words, beneath any behavior, beneath any presentation. She can feel the difference between a man who is holding his ground from fear and a man who is holding his ground from fullness. And fullness, in a world full of men reaching outward for what they have not built inward, is the rarest signal of all. I spent the last years of my life in exile writing books that Florence may never read. I was not thinking about whether Florence was thinking about me. I was thinking about what was true. about the nature of men and power and fortune and desire and what it actually costs to navigate a world that arranges itself according to no one's preferences. A world that rewards preparation and punishes need. A world where the gap between what you want and what you have is not a problem to be solved but an engine to be directed. I wrote because the writing was the direction. Because the thinking was worth doing regardless of whether anyone received it. Because a man who has something real to offer does not stop offering it because the room has temporarily emptied. The room always refills for the man who is worth waiting for. And the man who is worth waiting for is not the one who has been waiting at the door. He is the one who was inside building while everyone else was standing at the entrance hoping to be let in. Go build. The gap will take care of itself. And so, in the end, will she.